This is Morgan Freeman. If you enjoy listening to The Edge, support them by subscribing to The Edge on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen through the iHeartRadio app. Get busy listening.
This is The Edge.
The advantage it means.
Hey, look, I just spit on me for no reason.
That's horrible.
Is there some comfort in uncertainty, do you think?
You're a degenerate.
Because Australian Shepherds need action.
Wow. Yeah.
This is The Edge.
That's a self-loathing term that I use.
Oh, got it.
You're tuned to The Edge. Edge-show.com.
Hi, this is Mark Thompson, and welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate all the ways you support this show. A lot of you have subscribed on iTunes, on Stitcher. That keeps us alive just in those universes. Any positive reviews that you write help us as well. All the little stuff matters. And, of course, financial contributions keep the ball rolling because it's a free podcast and we don't take any advertising. And so the only way we sustain is with your contributions. We run in the red, but we're happy to run in the red. But thank you for what you do by clicking the PayPal link and leaving us whatever you can. Now, today, this has been a very contentious political season, as you're aware. There has been a lot of slime thrown both ways. Today, Jimmy Dore joins us. Jimmy Dore is a comic. He's an author. He's a YouTube sensation. He's a frequent contributor to TYT, and Jimmy is a true firebrand when it comes to politics. But he also likes a good martini, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. The Fast 15 with Michael Shure. We get into the Electoral College, and Michael likes the Electoral College. I don't. And by the way, Jimmy doesn't either. So that will kind of be played out in this episode as well. Thanks for being here. It's a lot of politics. And you might actually pick up a piece of information or two that you want to pass along. So give it a chance, I would say. All right. I know they're not. There's some people who don't like the politics. That's all I'm saying. All right. Oh yeah. In fact, we read a comment from a listener who doesn't like the politics. So anyway, I would say tough it out. You'll enjoy the show. Thanks for being here.
This is The Edge.
This hot political season, time to check in with our political expert, a man who is covering intensely these campaigns on the road. In fact, you're leaving. Where are you going?
Tomorrow I'm going to Eau Claire, Wisconsin to hear Donald Trump, and thereafter I think to Nevada to hear Elizabeth Warren or go see President Obama speak about Hillary Clinton in North Carolina.
His itinerary full of that kind of thing. He is our Michael Shure, everybody.
Thank you. Wow.
Michael Shure, yeah.
Then nothing feels good than seeing all of your faces here.
Here's what we do with Michael Shure. We talk politics, and we also usually sprinkle in one or two other things. In Southern California, this famous food critic, Jonathan Gold, came out with his 101 best restaurants of 2016. Now, you saw that I had a copy of that on the table.
Yeah.
And you excitedly ran to it.
Of course. No.
Why?
Because I stopped my papers because I've been on the road so much, and so I didn't get this copy of it. Because I think it's a great guide. There was a documentary called City of Gold that came out this year, I think. Talking about who Jonathan Gold is and how he's not, the Mimi Sheraton, Ruth Reichel type of food reviewer who just goes to the fine restaurants and eats there. He can tell you, and I will tweet him sometimes, hey, I'm between Banning and Palm Springs, anything to look at, and he'll tweet back. He doesn't always respond, but he's tweeted back to me, yeah, get off here and go to this, and so he'll tell you some things that places to go. He goes to holes in the wall. He's not as much about atmosphere as he is about the food, which I think is how it, in essence, truly should be. And he'll tell you, like, if there's an occasion, go to this restaurant or whatever. But so he's also a character, and he's a really good writer. That's the thing about him. He's a really good writer. He did this project, I think, can we say turn of the century yet? Back at the turn of the century,
2000, you mean?
Yeah. Is that when does the turn of the century stop the 18 to 1900?
I don't know exactly when it kicks in, but it hasn't kicked in.
It hasn't.
No.
Should we start it now?
If you want to try.
Okay. I think the Edge show should make this a mission. So back at the turn of the century, Jonathan Gold did a project, and in Los Angeles there are these huge boulevards that go from basically the ocean downtown to the city to the sea, as they say, and Pico Boulevard is one of those famous ones, and it winds through nice neighborhoods, not so nice neighborhoods, high income, low income, and lets you out at the Pacific Ocean. Jonathan Gold did a project where he ate at every single restaurant on Pico Boulevard. every single one. It took him, quite a bit of time.
That's a very cool project.
Yeah, it's a very cool project, and it's a very interesting thing he did. So anyway, it's he's diligent, if nothing else. So having his, most places in the world and the country can't have 101 best restaurants because they, some places have 4 restaurants. So
Sure.
This is a good tool.
What an interesting niche, by the way, for him to have carved out. I understand that that's what he loves. He's a good writer, and he's a good eater, clearly. Okay,
Yeah.
those two things have come together. But to be a food critic, you have to end up in a major city. You have to end up writing probably for a major publication like the LA Times. And then as the consolidation and reduction of these publishing outlets begins all across the country, you have to hope that you survive the cut.
That's exactly right. And he seems indispensable. I mean, they have a special edition of. I mean, he seems like he could work wherever he wanted, whenever he does. I'm sure that he has cutouts to do other projects as well. You're right, though. I mean,
But,
it's,
but the Jonathan Gold 4.0, who's coming up now,
Right.
This just in, you're going to be a blogger.
That's true.
And you just have to hope that it's possible that your blog and your Instagram or whatever it may be, or the combination of those 2 things or 3 things or whatever, may exceed the popularity of a Jonathan Gold in the new media.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But also, food sells now, and all these media outlets know that when you do a special edition on food in a newspaper, it does do better. When food television does really well in context. So I guess these outlets do know that there's something that's indispensable and having food be a part of it. Because people, we like reviews, right? We like to go to places that are hot or good or whatever, adjective you want to throw in there, and that's how people have traditionally done it. So yes, but you're right. I mean, as the newspaper business slowly goes down, so too will the food reviewers that write in those newspapers.
The highest paid chefs in the world, who do you think would top that list?
Well, I mean, hard to highest paid, but like I would guess that Wolfgang Puck attaches his name to so many things that he is among the highest. But I mean, is there a chef who is paid by a restaurant?
No, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I don't even know what it means. I just saw the headline because someone asked me just last night. It's so weird we have this conversation. They said, "Who do you think is the chef that makes the most money?" I forget how they put it. Being a chef, or who do you think is the chef who's generates the most revenue annually? I guessed Gordon Ramsay.
Oh, that was a good guess. I'm going to guess. Does Anthony Bourdain still count as a chef?
No.
Okay.
Well, you can guess him. He's not. I'm sure he's not.
I'm not going to guess him then.
Yeah.
So
you
were so
it's
absolute
a bad
about
guess.
it. Yeah, well,
Go ahead and guess it.
Who would guess it? I'm going to say Wolfgang Puck is. I'm going to give you 3. I'm going to say Wolfgang Puck. I'm going to say Jose Andres, and I'll say John George van Gerichten.
I love the Jose Andres addition to your list. He's the guy who does Bazaar here in L.A., and he's the one who got into this dust-up with Trump over his Washington establishment after Trump made those comments about Latinos. According to People magazine, People with Money magazine,
I've never seen that magazine.
For the people who are just too bored by people, maybe people with money will more scratch your itch. Jamie Oliver.
Oh,
has taken the number
I
one
wish
spot.
that I had thought of that. I like him.
Yeah.
I think he's really engaging and really good. And I mean, I've made his food too, and it's good. But I like him. I like his whole shtick.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Congratulations, Jamie Oliver.
Well done. He's made it to people with money. So people with money is clearly a response to the success of the Forbes 400 and the Fortune 500 and all of that, right?
I'm guessing it's an insert and some sub-publication of People magazine.
Right.
People
It's
with
like, people are always curious how much. When you Google someone, the first choice is always net worth, right?
Yeah.
So people like
And the default is 10 million for most famous people, I've found.
Yeah.
It shows up way too much to be correct. All right. Now, Michael Shure, we're so lucky to have you here in between all of these trips to cover all these various things. The Electoral College is the way we elect presidents in this country. Why do we use the Electoral College? What is it, and why does it exist here?
It's a representative way of electing the president. It's similar to the primaries. You're not really voting for the candidate directly. You're voting for delegates to go to your state or your county, state, and national conventions of the party to support.
Stop right there. Why do we do that? Why not just have it one person, one vote, and the person we vote for gets in?
Most of the original thinking of this goes back to when we had an agrarian economy. And it was city mouse and country mouse, and it was to protect the people who did different, disciplines in this country and how they voted their own interests. Now, what's ironic is that when you go to the Electoral College, it's largely the same. I mean, they had an amazing amount of foresight, these founding fathers or the people that wrote this in, that we don't directly elect. We do popular vote, and the popular vote elects electors. There are actual electors who are people that will meet in D.C. after the election, and they will vote. And there's already a potential elector in the state of it's either Oregon and Washington who's a Democrat who said if Hillary Clinton wins that state, he still may not vote for Hillary Clinton. So there is an autonomy that these people have. It's rarely exercised. In 2008, one elector voted for John Edwards. They do it to make a statement more than they do to make a difference. So if it's overwhelming, that elector may not vote for the candidate who will inevitably win. It seems silly.
So there are 538 of these electors, 270 of them, once you've acquired that number, you're now in.
Correct.
Okay. The argument against it has always been sort of what I had suggested, which is why is there a middleman and why are there guys like the one you just noted changing their mind at the last minute?
Yeah, well, those things, I mean, you can't really explain those anomalous things, and it doesn't really happen. It's never happened where it's mattered, which doesn't mean it couldn't, but you would have to have a cabal of electors get together and say, we're going to undo this. And if it's not going to happen this year, then it likely will never happen. But the reason is, and the reason that it still makes sense is, imagine the popular vote in the year 2000 went to Al Gore. He beat George Bush, and he lost in the Electoral College. He lost the Supreme Court, but in any case, he lost because he had fewer electoral votes than George Bush. A lot of people thought, well, why are we doing this? More people in America woke up that morning voting for Al Gore to be president than voting for George Bush. Well, that's true, and that's the pitfall of the Electoral College. However, if there were not an Electoral College, you would have presidential candidates campaigning in about 5 states. They would go Texas, California, Florida, New York. Maybe you'd see them in Virginia. Maybe Michigan. Maybe it's 10 states, right? You would exclude so many people because there are so few people in a lot of those states, and you would exclude so many disciplines. So agrarian issues, which they tried to protect from the very get-go, farmers would have no voice because farmers don't live in the city. When you're running for office, you go where the votes are. You don't spend your time if you're running for Senate in California, you don't spend all your time in Ukiah, California, right? You're in Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, Fresno. You're in the population centers, San Jose. You won't go to the small places because you win the popular vote here, you win the Senate seat. That's what would happen in a presidential race, too, and you don't want that to happen in a presidential race. It's too massive, and the numbers of people and the numbers of disciplines that would be overlooked because of that, numbers of issues that would be overlooked, would be astonishing.
Just a devil's advocate position for a second. We're not an agrarian economy anymore, and so these farmers that you talk about, they don't really exist in big numbers anymore. I mean, when I say big numbers, I mean to tip the balance economically.
Well, Mark, we're not an agrarian economy, but Kansas is an agrarian economy. Iowa is an agrarian economy. Wisconsin, dairy land is not just on the license plate. That makes that state go. The dairy industry, the cattle industry, all of that. So, yes, the nation is not, but Wisconsin's in this country, and Wisconsin and those interests, which matter to everyone else. So the thought is, and I know I interrupted you, and you had more to say, but the thought would be that if you marginalize and you don't give breaks and subsidies and you don't care about the people in Wisconsin who are milking cows, then the price of milk in the places that we do care about, quote unquote, is going to go through the roof, and it will affect the economy.
Well, the only thing I was going to mention was that after the election, I don't think there's any issue with the interests of agriculture being represented in Washington. They are represented in enormous ways, and the subsidies associated with agriculture are obscenely high. In fact, most of these agricultural interests are represented by conglomerates. These are huge corporations that are really doing this agriculture now. We talk about farmers, and we still have this sort of sense of a farmer tilling soil and working on the land. But the truth is the number of farmers like that really has been reduced to a pretty small number.
Right. That was what you asked how it started, and it's ironic that it still would affect that sector of the population. But, for example, if you had, and yes, you're right, after the election, each state's still has 2 senators, which is disproportional.
I don't like that either.
Chuck Schumer, who represents millions and millions of New Yorkers, has as much influence with his 1 vote as Mike Enzi in Wyoming, who represents the fewest number of people in the country. So those protections do exist after the election, but they should exist. The people who put this in place thought during the presidential election, which is the most important. It's not just agrarian. I mean, listen, if the state of Indiana, right, has a good number of people, but it's sort of in the middle of the pack of America, it's where a lot of the senior care industry is, in terms of the headquarters of many people in senior care and nursing homes, and it's corporate and whatnot, but it creates a lot of jobs in that state, exports a lot of those jobs as well to other states. That industry, they feel like, well, if the presidential candidates don't come here, we're not getting any piece of the pie there. You're right, they get it afterwards, but they're voting for president, and president is supposed to be the president of the whole country. So it's they feel that this protects the representation of interests and places. And, Democrats may say, hey, it would be great to have presidents elected in every urban area, right? Because if the candidates only went to New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, Dallas, Austin, Boston, and Phoenix, right? You'd have Democrats elected every single time, which, to Democrats seems like a great thing. But I promise you, even as, someone who has been I guess sympathetic to the Democratic Party, you know what that does, right? It would just give power to one party in this country all the time, which is not a great thing. No matter what you think of the other side, it makes one side better if the other side is competitive. And that's another thing that would be lost, because there's no question that it would be impossible for anybody but a Democrat to get elected.
One of the things I like about Michael Shure is that you are an equal opportunity critic of both parties. All of these analysts have biases of one sort or another, but I think that you rotisserie each side equally. We're really out of time, but you just sparked something when you said it would be bad for this country to have one party in control of things all the time. Are we getting to the point that both parties are beginning to feel like the same party? I understand on social issues, the Republican Party is still very, very different. Democrats, they separate on that. But then it seems to me a lot of other things come together. Are they becoming the same party?
If you ask a lot of the people that supported Bernie Sanders, if you, in this general election, ask a lot of voters that, they will say yes. But if you take pen to paper or you show people the differences between the parties, it's still astonishing with, the differences are stark. First of all, the judiciary, who they would put on as circuit court justices and Supreme Court justices as nominees. You go down to entitlements, very, very different on entitlements. You go down to health care, very different on health care. There are such stark differences. It's the people. So Hillary Clinton, who was a senator from New York, so when you're a senator from New York, you represent Wall Street, right? She has this sort of tone that many people think is very Republican, much more so than the person she'd be replacing if she wins, and other Democrats who've served. So I understand that the people may seem that way, but the parties themselves and the politics that they pursue are still vastly different, and the way that they go about doing it is also different stylistically. But that shouldn't matter. It's more about the meat of the order.
If you want to reach Michael Shure, you can do so on Twitter. He's at Michael Shure, Shure, and it's Michel.
No, you got that wrong. AEL. Michael.
Michael.
Mouse.
Michael Shure, the Fast 15, everybody.
Thank you,
Come
people.
on.
People, thanks.
See you
guys
after the
are great.
election, Michael.
See you after the election, Mark.
We're talking about TSA. Oh, I should do the peer check. That's the thing.
It's a game changer.
I can't believe I haven't done it.
I can't believe you haven't either.
Well,
you might not pass.
Probably. I haven't flown really in the last 2 years. And
We're going to get to that because Jimmy doesn't need to fly anymore. He doesn't need to leave his little Jimmy Dore land.
Or did he start his Jimmy Dore studio?
Because he's got a Jimmy Dore studio.
Or anything.
He doesn't. You know how he rages against the man, which is one of the reasons Jimmy Dore is here.
Yeah.
He really has found a life independent of the man, supported by the people. A robust and powerful support network that has nothing to do with corporate structure or the man. I love that. Get into it.
Thank you so much.
Do you know who did get cleared for TSA pre-check.
Oh, the prisoner?
Yeah.
Your boyfriend, the prisoner, the
Yeah.
ex-felon?
So you guys are—he's out,
Oh yeah.
and you guys are
Have I
together.
not seen you since then?
No.
Oh my gosh, Jimmy, it's been a long time.
You guys are together.
Mhm.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It's really cute. You want to see a picture?
Oh, isn't that nice?
Jimmy's like, not really.
See a picture of my boyfriend? Yes, please.
I did not even remotely mean to say it like that. I just meant, yeah, because every time someone sees a picture of him, they're like, oh, wow, that's not at all what I was expecting.
If it's Vin Rames.
That was a great poll. How did you come up with Bing Rain?
He sat there and thought about it for a while.
That's why Jimmy's here also. He's funny. Heather, I found a comment from a listener.
Oh, yeah?
And it fits. It says, Mark, I've been a fan for years. I strongly suggest you leave the political ideology off the beginning of the show. I'm tuning in to be entertained and informed, not to hear polarized political ideology. It's your show to do with that as you see fit, but I'm just relaying that as a longtime fan, turning me off from future listening with the continuous anti-Trump, anti-Republican diatribe. Hope it changes very soon. Regards, Randy. Well, Randy, this is the show for you because, Randy, there is politics in this show. In fact, it's oozing politics, but everybody gets torched, okay? I don't want you to, not anti-Trump. You're going to hear Hillary Clinton get rotisseried by our guest, and that guest is Jimmy Dore, everybody. Come on, Jimmy Dore. Now, Jimmy Dore, before we get all to frying everybody,
Okay.
you're a big martini drinker like I am. But you like gin martinis.
I certainly like a nice gin martini, and it's got to be in the right glass. You can't have a lip on your martini glass.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What are people thinking? That's for champagne or some kind of
Right.
punch.
I don't like that either.
No.
Give me a real badass martini glass.
The straighter the better, like at an angle, an open
James
V.
Bond drank.
Yes. So there's a reason why, and it's got to be ice cold.
You guys. I like my vodka dirty and in a regular glass.
That's a different drink.
That is a different drink.
Because I tip the martini glasses over.
But Jimmy's a real purist about it. That's one of the things I like about you. You're a purist about your
Well, there's an
martini.
experience.
Yes,
there's a
thank you.
whole thing to the martini. There's a ritual.
Yes.
Right? Just like with everything.
That's right. A lot of life is ritualized, and I agree. And drinking a martini, a great martini, is one of those things. Now, I thought you had an experience. You sat down and you told the guy what you wanted with the gin, and
So
then
we go to this place. I don't know. I won't name it, but we go to this place that's famous for its gin. Right? They were written up in the local paper. That's why we went.
So for you, that has to be like going to Disneyland.
I was like, yay! Right? So we go there, and that's when they started. The first time I went, it was educational, and I tried a couple different gins. I figured out which one I really liked, and the ones everyone normally anyway. So I figured out I like this one. It's called Plymouth gin. Right? Really mellow, not a lot going on, and it's not bitter. So I go to this place, and this guy's a little over, proud of himself, and one of these guys showing off, shaking the thing.
He's the bartender
Hey,
guy?
how you doing? Hey, and so he comes over and he's like, "Hey, I gotta get you a ticket." I'm like, "Sure, I'd like to. Can I get me a Plymouth Martini, extra dirty, shaken, extra hard?" And he said, "Oh, you're gonna make it extra dirty? You don't want to put that in with Plymouth. That'll just overpower. You want to put it in with a blah blah blah." And I go, I know what I like. And he goes. He says, "Well, but I'm telling you, have you ever had it?" I go, "No." He's like, "Oh, well, I'm telling you, it's the perfect thing if you're going to put olive juice." And I go,
So you're saying you try this other gin?
"Yeah." He's trying to get me to. I forget the name of it, but he's like, "Just try." And I just go, "Oh, you know what? Okay, all right. I didn't come here to have an argument, whatever. I just want to order a martini. But okay, maybe I'll be open to new experiences. Okay." So I go, "Okay." And he turns around and looks at his shelves, and he turns back. He goes, "We're out of it."
Oops.
So I go, "Okay, how about the Plymouth?"
Can we both agree now on the Plymouth?
So he goes, "Okay," right? So he goes and he makes me my martini, and he brings it over, and he brings me a little sidecar. You ever see those little? And he says, "Hey, I brought you the olive juice on the side, and you can add it if you want," which I don't fucking want it that way.
You wanted it shaken
I
over
want it
the...
really, because now if I pour the olive juice isn't icy cold.
Right. That's why you want it shaken over the ice.
I want it shaken to make it, and I'm just like, "Okay, all right." And I didn't. So
you were being a nice guy.
I'm
so
being a
you're,
nice guy. I'm like,
okay.
I'm not. I'm going to have dinner, so I don't want to get in the thing. I'm just like, okay, whatever, thanks. So I put a little bit of the olive juice in, and I took a drink, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot going on with this gin. Like, what's going on? And, I said, Steph, taste this. And she goes, oh, yeah, that's like, there's like a lot of floral shit happening. So he comes over and he goes, hey, how's the gin? How's your martini? And I just go, oh, great. I give him the A-OK sign. Like,
You could have said, hey, it just doesn't quite, you didn't quite
I don't
get-
want to go through it.
But
I don't
yes,
want
yeah,
to
you
talk
wanna
to
deal
this
with
guy.
it,
I
yeah.
really was hungry.
Right.
Right? I'm really hungry. I really want to just get dinner, and this is my pre-dinner drink. And I go, yeah, okay, just I don't want to talk, right? I want to be with. And so he comes over and he puts the bottle. He has a bottle of gin in his hand. He takes it away from his back. He puts it in front of me, and whatever. Then he goes, "That's what you're drinking." And I'm like, "You motherfucker!" Yeah, I'm not really crazy about it.
Yeah, so he didn't even give you the
Didn't
Plymouth.
even give me the Plymouth. Then he gave me another one that he thought would go better because I wanted it dirty, and they have in their head that they know what would be better with it. No, I know how I like.
So he slams the bottle
so he
in
slams
front
the
of
bottle
you.
in front of you, like, showed you.
See?
And I
This-
still, this is so not me. I still was like, oh, great, thanks.
You just let him have
Yeah,
the moment.
just like, I'm not, if I start, it's not going to end. He's going to defend himself, and then I'm going to,
You're right. You're right.
and I still just want something to eat. And you know what? It took 45 fucking minutes for us to get something to eat.
Where were you?
We were, I don't want to say.
Oh.
And so it was, we've been there before, right? So this is how I first found out about the gin. So we've been there before. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience. You ever been to a restaurant, you get there and you're starving, and then you order, and then the food's not coming, and it's like a half hour, and you're like, boy, I'm in a restaurant. If I could just get something to eat. Just give me something to eat while I'm waiting for you to bring my dinner. Just bring me something. When you're just starving? What are the odds? I'm in a restaurant and I can't get anything to fucking eat. Just bring me something.
Could you run down the street to maybe a restaurant or something and get me something to eat?
Just bring me something to eat. I'm starving.
That's
for fuck's
usually when
sake.
I'm inhaling the bread.
Bread
during
with something to dip in it.
Yeah.
Maybe a little
tapenade.
Yeah, something. You go to an Italian place, they give you the nice balsamic with an olive oil. It's something to get me going. And anyway, so that's my gin story.
I love that you rolled over for the bartender because you didn't want to have to deal with it. I get it. You didn't want to take the static. But the bilious rage he saves for our culture,
Yes,
our
thank
society, our politics, our two parties, Republican and Democrat.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Listen, I just want to say to everybody considering voting for Hillary Clinton, remember she supported the Iraq war, gutted welfare, deregulated Wall Street, crashed our economy, supported a right-wing overthrow of a Democratic government in Honduras. And George Orwell says the people that elect corrupt politicians, imposters, thieves, and traitors are not victims, but accomplices.
Oh, I think that's very well put. Is there an alternative now for Hillary? And certainly Donald Trump falls in the same category of corrupt, don't you think?
Yes, of course.
Well, so I'm asking you,
this is a great system we have, right?
Right.
You get to pick between, Mussolini or Hitler. I mean, come on.
Are they equivalent?
Well, certainly in some ways, let me just stop this false equivalence, this thing of voting for the lesser of two evils. There is no doubt about it that Bill Clinton was the greater evil than George Herbert Walker Bush or Bob Dole could have ever been, because let's remember, George Herbert Walker Bush could not get NAFTA passed through Congress because he was Republican and the Democrats united against it because they still used to kind of represent working people back then.
You're saying George Bush couldn't get NAFTA
George
passed.
Herbert Walker.
Yeah, right. The first George.
first George.
Wait, yeah, why did you emphasize the Bush on that?
No, because I thought he was saying Clinton couldn't because he was.
No, but it took a Democrat to pass NAFTA.
Right.
It took a Democrat to gut welfare. Remember, 70% of the people who were on welfare at the time were children. And it took a Democrat to deregulate Wall Street and the telecommunications industry, which is why we have 6 companies that bring you all your news, radio, television, entertainment, sport. He dismantled the New Deal in ways Reagan could only dream about. And when they repealed the New Deal banking regulations, that was the nail in the coffin. And within a decade, they crashed the economy. And by the way, the difference was when Barack Obama bailed out the banks, which is something he should have done. He didn't do any of the other things he should have did, which was break them up, put him in the receivership. He could have capitalized national banks all across the country, 10-1 with $10 billion. He didn't do any of that stuff. Plus, the big thing was there was no jobs program. And that's the thing I think that is most disgusting. And, there's been a corporate coup d'etat in this country, and it's been complete, and it's in slow motion. And this, Sheldon Wolin, who's a great political scientist who passed in 2015, he's the one who talked a lot about this corporate coup d'etat. And it has happened, we went from having, like I said before, the last time I was on here, the general election used to be a corporatist running against a person who anti-war and represented workers. And now we had that happen inside the Democratic primary. Mm-hmm. And then, so what happens when the Democrats move to the right, the way Bill Clinton did in such a radical way? That's why why are the Republicans so crazy? Because they have to go even further right then. And so every time the Democrat moves a little bit more right, it pushes them a little farther. The Republicans were perfectly okay with Obamacare before Obama tried to do it because Romney did it in Massachusetts. It started at the Heritage Foundation. So if Barack Obama would have had the balls to just propose, like Bernie Sanders has been talking about, and the more you talk about it, the more the people like it, if he would have just proposed Medicare for all, single payer, and then you could compromise somewhere, right? But there was no compromise because Barack Obama started at the middle of their position, which was Romneycare. So that's what I'm saying here. So people forget right now that it was, and that's not me talking that Bill Clinton was the greater evil. That's a lot of people. That's Thomas Frank, who wrote What's the Matter with Kansas. He said the same thing. People make that mistake, that Bill Clinton did things that Bob Dole and George Herbert Walker, meaning dismantling the New Deal. That prison population exploded. The money they put, private prisons, 100,000 new cops. Remember Bill Clinton? That was his whole thing, right? And what he did was he wrote a bubble, right? The dot-com bubble, which made his economic policies look good in the short term. But of course, within a decade, everything went tits up. And, then, of course, when George Bush, the second George Bush, W., when he passed his tax cuts, it took a Democrat to make them permanent, like Barack Obama did it. They couldn't make them permanent at the time. They had to put a sunset clause in, and then Barack Obama came by and made 90% of them permanent. So it's Democrats. So right now, Barack Obama is pushing the TPP. Now, if that was Donald Trump pushing a shit trade deal that was going to sell our country out and hurt poor people across the world, especially sick people, diabetics and AIDS patients and stuff like that, and give up our own sovereignty, which is what it's doing, there would be united opposition, and the press would be yelling about it. Maybe, I don't know, because Comcast, there's only 6 companies, and Comcast, which is, by the way, 2014's one of the worst companies in the world to work for, which owns MSNBC, they don't hear a peep about it because they own them, right? So people like Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow aren't going to talk about it, and if they do, they talk about it in a disingenuous way, and that's not hyperbole. So, and the guys who do talk stridently about it, like Ed Schultz, they fire them. And guys who do talk against the war, they fire them, like Phil Donahue. This isn't a secret. So it's just stuff that people don't like to think about. Right now, they're arresting journalists and cracking the heads of peaceful protesters in North Dakota with tanks in North Dakota right now at the behest of oil companies and Wall Street, the people who fund those projects, meaning the donors to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and you don't hear a peep.
You're talking about the North Dakota pipeline protests.
They're strip searching women. They're arresting journalists. They charged that journalist with offense 45 years. They threatened her with 45 years. Josh Fox, the film director of Gasland, they charged the director of his documentary, or the cinematographer of his documentary, with 45 years. Edward Snowden tweeted out, I was only charged with 30 years.
Oh, man.
So that's the kind of intimidation. What they're doing is trying to scare anybody else. Don't you guys, you Occupy people, don't you get any ideas. We're going to break the back of you right now. And they're doing it. And by the way, they didn't claw back any money from Wall Street after they crashed the economy. I don't know if anybody saw The Big Short. Just go see it, because the whole business is based on fraud, and it still is. And that's the whole thing that drives me crazy. People go, oh, Jill Stein doesn't understand quantitative easing. You mean the guys who crashed our economy and then rebuilt it on the backs of poor people? Those are the geniuses who we should trust to run our economy? People don't know this, but in those released emails, Hillary Clinton admits that she didn't understand how credit default swaps worked, even after having someone, Lloyd Blankfein, try to explain it to her for 15 minutes. And she also reveals that Alan Greenspan doesn't understand derivatives. They're too complicated. Well, let me tell you something. Used to be when investigators would go into banks and they would find complicated financial instruments, they knew if it was complicated, that meant fraud. And now when they see complicated financial instruments, they think, oh, isn't that amazing? This innovation.
But Margot Robbie in a hot tub explained it really, really well.
Yes, thank you. And so right now, people don't know this either. They're clawing back bonuses. They had to give people bonuses to go fight in the Iraq war and Afghanistan because nobody would go. Everybody knew it was bullshit. And
plus, they'd already been on like 4 tours.
So they gave people, some of them $20,000. They gave some of people money to go for 6 years to sign up for another 6. People went. Now they've taken their money back. They're taking their. Some people are on payment $650 a month to pay back soldiers who went there and served already.
Right. No, and that's become controversial, but the government hasn't completely backed off.
No, they've just put a halt.
They're going to make it a back burner item until the
until
the media heat blows over.
Yeah, exactly. So all that stuff about hey, so thanks for your service. Yeah, thanks for your service. Now, where's my fucking money?
Yeah. No, exactly. Well,
so
look,
anybody who signs up, God bless those guys. I wouldn't entertain them. Those guys are all decent human beings. I love them. The military guys, the rank and file. But all those generals know. If you meet a general, you know that he knows that war is bullshit. And if there's a war there's an oil pipeline or a gas pipeline. People don't know what Syria is about. Syria is about 2 competing pipelines that want to go through Syria. One from Qatar and Saudi, which is the Sunnis, and one from Iran, which is the Shia. So they both want to go through Syria. Russia doesn't want neither of them because they sell most of the gas and oil to frickin' Europe. So that's why he's backing Assad. Right? And that's why Assad is with him. And that's why we want to. As soon as he said no to these. By the way, we did this before. We overthrew the leader of Iran, which is the first democratically elected leader in 4,000 years of civilization in Iran. And we overthrew him because he was going to make the oil just for Iran. And we wanted it for BP. So we overthrew him, installed the Shah, and 20 years of repressive right-wing governance at the behest of the CIA, of his own people. They finally revolted, and that's how we got the Ayatollah, which is a theocracy in Iran, even though those people aren't really as crazy as people want to make them out to be. But people like Sam Harris will say it's all because of the Quran. No, it's because of CIA. And everybody in the Arab world knows this, except us back in America, because we have shit brains for journalists.
I don't know where to start with that. I'm just going to start with the last part first. Iran is about the tribal aspects as they relate to the economic connections in the Middle East. It's not Shia Sunni from a Quran standpoint. It's a Shiite Sunni from a control of the oil standpoint.
Right. And when we went off, the people don't understand. Well, why are we so aligned with Saudi Arabia if they're so crazy repressive and they're the thing we're supposed to be against and everything? And why are we backing their extermination of the Houthis in Yemen right now? And what the hell? And well, it all goes back to when we went off the gold standard. So Saudi Arabia guaranteed to monetize their oil in petrodollars. And so that's what we use now. So everybody who wants to buy oil's got to first get dollars and then go buy their oil, and so that's a big deal. And we promised them that we would use our military to fight off all their enemies. So this is what this is all about, right? Money, power, oil. And, Hillary Clinton says gas is the bridge to the future, a 30-year bridge, by the way, of natural gas, which is brought to us by fracking, which is brought to us with methane, which traps 80 times more heat than carbon does. By the way, it's all over, by the way. People should just start planning for the apocalypse because sea level rise, every time they measure, they're like shocked at how fast. It's like faster than anybody predicted. And, if you go back to the Copenhagen Agreement, they decided that we're going to try to keep it at 2 degrees, which a lot of people said, 2 degrees Celsius, which a lot of people said that wasn't enough at all. And, Paris Agreement's even worse. It's 3 degrees. It's too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, nobody's doing anything.
But there's no accountability. I mean, they say, we're going to try to keep it, but there's no accountability anyway.
They won't even do cap and trade. They won't even do the Republican idea.
Right. It's that nobody wants to give up their lifestyle in any kind of substantial way,
It's like that George Carlin bit where he said, it's a big club and you're not in it. And they don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you at all. And I'm reading this email. There was an email from... who's the head of Google?
I don't know.
Serge, what's his name?
Brin? Bet you could Google it. Okay, that wasn't funny at all.
I thought it's Larry Page.
Yeah, I'll think of it in a second. So he sent an email. There's an email that came out of him saying you should staff your campaign with enthusiastic, smart, low-paid workers.
That's the Google model.
So here's the email that he sent. He said the campaign headquarters will have about 1,000 people, mostly young, hardworking, and enthusiastic. It is important to have a very large hiring pool, such as in Chicago and New York City, from which to choose enthusiastic, smart, and low-paid permanent employees. Permanent.
Wow.
So that's the head of Google. So that's what George Carlin says when they don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck. They're going to sign a trade deal. And you know whose jobs they do protect? They protect the copyright of Silicon Valley. They don't protect the workers. You have to compete against slaves in other countries, or even more desperate, more poor people in a more poor country. That's that. But by the way, doctors? No, doctors and dentists and all. You don't have to compete. They all have to come here and be trained. You can't compete. That's not good. No. So there's certain people they protect and certain people they don't. It's the workers. And that's the problem, right? So the whole problem has been that there is no party for the workers, which is also fueling the Trump phenomenon, which people don't understand.
I understand that.
Okay, I think some people do. And
I do.
Michael Moore gave a great speech about it, and then he concluded you have to vote for Hillary Clinton. And the point is that the next Trump that comes along, because a lot of that's all these. If Bernie Sanders would have been in the race, it would have at least a third of Trump's support would have been siphoned to him. Right, because these are people who both political parties have turned their back on, and they've seen their jobs go out the window. And like Michael Moore said, when Trump stood up in Detroit and he told the heads of the car companies that if you send their jobs to Mexico, I'll put a 35% tariff on it. And just to hear him say that made those people feel ecstatic. No one's ever said that to those motherfuckers, right? And at least to have a guy up there, a millionaire, sticking his thumb in their eye, and he's the Molotov cocktail that those people who have been left behind, on purpose, by the way. So I was watching Katie Couric doing some fine work over at Yahoo News. She was interviewing...
hey, man, she's got a job.
Howard Dean, right, who's a big surrogate for the Hillary Clinton campaign. And she said, why is it that the people who put together these trade deals, who benefit some very well, but there's some who get left out, like the workers? Why don't they build a safety net in for that? And Howard Dean says that's because the people in Washington don't know what the hell they're doing. Nobody knows anything, and they're too removed from and they live in a bubble. And then she interrupts, and she said, well, then why should we vote for someone who's been there the longest? And he goes, because we have no choice. Literally, that's what he said. So we've gone from the lesser of two evils to the lesser of no fucking choice. And I say it's much easier. It's like people were like, when Donald Trump said he was going to imprison Hillary Clinton, people were like going crazy about that. Like, you can't, that's like a banana republic. You threaten to imprison your political opponents. We don't do that in America. No, but right now in America, Barack Obama is using the Espionage Act 10 times more than any other president to imprison journalists who expose war crimes inside our own government. They don't prosecute the war criminals. They prosecute the guy who's exposing them, which is horrible. And it's like we're a nation of adult children of alcoholics. We don't get angry at the war criminal. We get angry at the guy who told us, just like Edward Snowden, who is a hero. And guess who else turns out to be a hero? Monica Lewinsky. Jimmy, what are you talking about? Well, she saved Social Security. Jimmy, one blowjob saved Social Security. You're fucking right, it did. How did it do that? Well, Bill Clinton, in his final selling out of the New Deal, had signed a secret deal with Bill Clinton. This is true.
Wait, with who?
Bill Clinton signed it with Newt Gingrich to privatize Social Security. And it was all set. And the next day, Monica Lewinsky happened, and that all those plans went all out the window. I don't know if you saw last week, Hillary Clinton, they floated an idea, this big guy from a hedge fund who says, this isn't about me, this is helping old people. Going to make it mandatory to put their savings into a fund in Wall Street. Did you hear about that? Make it mandatory. That's instead of putting more money into Social Security, no. Now we're privatized, just like George Carlin said. They want your retirement money, and now they want they want it back. and they're going to fucking get it. And so in 2 years, it'll be even worse. In 4 years, the next Trump that comes along will be a lot smarter. And he won't be such an easily wounded narcissistic maniac. He'll be very much more Machiavellian. And if you read those WikiLeaks emails, it also shows that Hillary Clinton's campaign from a long time ago wanted to elevate Trump. They wanted him to be the one this is what they wanted for obvious reasons, because this is the guy they could beat. But the next time when it comes along, Chris Hedges says this, that the next Trump will be smarter and he won't be as crazy on the outside. They'll elevate him again and he will crush them.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that's when we're in trouble. And he'll have a Republican Congress and a Republican Senate.
I was going to say this about Trump, because I've heard this argument that, I think he's a clunky con, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's kind of like Trump University. Feels like a con to me, although I can see how people might have gotten sucked into Trump University. This is just a bunch of empty slogans. He doesn't really know anything. We know he doesn't know anything. We know he hasn't contributed to charity. We know he has said a bunch of things that he's done he hasn't really done. So I feel like he's kind of clunky. But to Jimmy's point, the next guy, not going to be a clunky con, because most guys are not as clunky as Donald Trump. What he is, Donald Trump is charismatic in his own weird way. He's a well-known brand, and his brand is, I'm rich and I've got the good life. Let me bring it to you. Now, to me, that feels like flim-flam. It just feels like another guy knocking at the door like going, ma'am, if you'll just give me $79 a month, I'm going to bring a book to you every month, and it's going to make you live like me. But the next guy's not going to be that way. But who is that next guy?
Can I just, before we get to the next guy, the people who are supporting him or excited about him, maybe winning, I think a lot of them also see that. They also think he's probably a con, and they see all this bullshit and Trumpian. But they also see that everybody fucking hates him. The Republican establishment hates him. The fucking car guys hate him, right? The fucking bankers won't fucking work with him anymore, right? That's why he has to go to Russia to get cash, right? And he tells all of them, go fuck yourselves, right? Like the Tea Party's about telling the Republican establishment to go fuck themselves. Fuck you, Jeb Bush and George Bush, for not being true conservatives, for getting ourselves entangled in foreign bullshit wars, and then fucking expanding Medicare like he did with Medicare Part D, which was with just a complete giveaway. Talk about a giveaway of a social program with no cost controls. Anyway, so that's what they hated about George. So there's, again, one party rule. There is no different. There's no opposition party anymore. There's no, and here's the thing. I had this woman on my show. Her name is Shishama Sawant, and she ran for the city council in Seattle, and she's a socialist. And she talks about not working why don't you do this within the Democratic Party? And she said, well, what you don't understand is when I was fighting to get the $15 minimum wage in Seattle, which we got, she said, I had to fight against the Democratic Party. The Democratic mayor was against me, said, you never get it. And the Democratic, we got it. And she said, so for people like me, inside the Democratic Party is a graveyard for my movement. They don't want it. She said, if you look at what happened, now it's been revealed through the wiki. If you look at what happened with the DNC, their first priority was not to defeat the Republicans. Their first priority was to first defeat the agenda of workers, which is Bernie Sanders. So they first wanted to defeat the populace, the guy who wasn't bought by corporations, meaning their donors, right? So their donors are Wall Street. You cannot be in bed.
First wanted to.
You cannot be in. I'll tell you again.
Defeat the agenda of the
workers. You could not be in bed with Wall Street and then also be sticking up for workers. The Wall Street's agenda is diametrically opposed to workers. It's anti-union. It's outsourcing. It's everything that unions hate. So first they had to make sure they got rid of that guy. And then once they got rid of that guy, then though, okay, because they'd rather risk losing to Republicans than having a fucking populist take over a real revolution, a guy who doesn't serve Wall Street. That's what this is all about. It's clear that that's what this is all about. And that's why Bernie ran in the first place. And nobody ever thought he was going to get more than 1 or 2% of the vote.
He certainly wasn't getting any media attention. And the WikiLeaks emails do bear out what Jimmy's saying. They really did want to defeat this guy who they associated as an outsider, somebody who was shaking up the party. And as Jimmy says, he wasn't getting support from their donors.
No,
right?
I get that. But to say that she was wanting to defeat the agenda of the workers by wanting to defeat Bernie Sanders is just broad. That's all.
Well,
I get what you're saying, but it's
You don't associate him with the agenda of the workers so
I
much.
wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't blanketly say she was specifically doing this because she wanted to defeat Bernie Sanders. That's all.
Well, I would say the DNC, which, by the way, was just hand in hand. There was no difference, as these WikiLeaks are revealing. Also, there's no difference between the DNC and so they were all lying and corrupt, and they were doing that to defeat the populist candidate. Right? The guy who was filling stadiums that people were excited. You know, like this happened. He's the guy we thought Barack Obama was going to be in 2008 because Barack Obama knew how to talk that populist. And that's what he talks about in this book I just read, Listen Liberal, Thomas Wolfe. He talks about how the modern day Democrats, Thomas Frank, they know how to talk all the language of populism, but then right now Barack Obama is pushing the TPP. Right now, which is the equivalent of NAFTA. Which, when Bill Clinton did that, he knew he was diminishing the power structure of the unions forever going forward, and he did it anyway. And look what happened, right? And Barack Obama was going to give card check. There's no card check. You know what that is, right? And that could have helped unions get back. And what did they do? You know, even Paul Krugman, who's in the tank for Hillary Clinton, because I think he wants to be Secretary of Treasury. Anyway, so even him, and he's a brilliant guy. And that's why, you know, people go, oh, you think you know more about economics than Paul Krugman? I go, no, but I can tell when Paul Krugman's bullshitting. I know when it doesn't ring true to me. When my bullshit detector goes off about something he says, I know. But even he was saying all along through the Barack Obama first term was that the government has lost its ability to respond rationally to problems because it's been so corrupted. It's the levers of our, you know, they pay fealty to democracy. But Princeton did that study. I don't know if you're aware, but they figured out that people's attitudes towards laws have no reflection on the laws that get put. The bottom 90% of earners, which is all of us, but the top 10% correlated perfectly. If 30% of the people wanted something, 30% of the time it got passed. If 70%, 70%. But after the 90% and lower in income had no... So we're living in an oligarchy, and Paul Krugman will readily admit that too. Oh, he says there's no doubt we're living in an oligarchy. So here we are. It used to be monopolies were bad. Now we have 6 companies, going to have AT&T's going to buy another. So,
I mean, it seems like a naked oligarchy now. I mean, it's so clear. I mean, we always talk about Russia as being run by a bunch of rich guys, but that's what America is. Yeah,
that's what
really
America is, right? So we don't really have we have a sham democracy. Those debates are a sham. 70% of the country wants three or four people up there debating. We don't get it. I don't think. Do I think Jill Stein would win? No, but I would love to hear what they would say when she says about your corporate donors. And let's get really. Hey, you know what? There hasn't been a question about climate change at a presidential debate since 2008.
Really?
And the next time they do ask a question about climate change, I won't have to worry about it anymore because I'll know hell has frozen over.
Wait, who was that? Gore?
2008 was when they had Barack Obama. But so since then, and they didn't all this year, they didn't ask a question about climate change.
I mean,
but they did ask about carpet bombing. And we're bombing, and no one ever says hi. You know, the Air Force literally said, we're running out of bombs, you guys.
Yeah, they ran out of bombs, I want to say, January of
last year. What do those bombs
year.
cost, $1 million or $2 million each?
Yeah.
They're dropping
They literally
30,000
didn't
of
have
them.
any more.
Can Americans get some jobs manufacturing them?
And that's the thing. So that's all we manufacture anymore. We manufacture bombs and weapons that we sell to people like Saudi Arabia who make big donations to the Clinton Foundation, and then they go and commit genocide in Yemen. Why? And now we started bombing in Yemen. Anyway, it's all about oil. Everything in the Middle East. And we had a plan. So we're bombing right now in 7 different countries, Muslim countries, right, Barack Obama? Isn't that amazing, right? So
we're bombing right now in 7 Middle Eastern countries? I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
I don't think I know 7 Middle Eastern countries. What
go.
Are they?
I could name, so now Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan.
Oh, I do know.
Oh, Pakistan, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a drone. We do dronies.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Imagine if there was another country droning inside our borders.
I've said that forever, yeah.
No,
All of a sudden,
I can't.
a building blew up. Oh, it was Russia drone a couple of guys they didn't like.
You know, we were sitting out on the balcony, and Wendy and I, and some 5 military helicopters flew by the other day. Did you see those? They were kind of coming right over here. Anyway, I remember I looked up in the sky and I thought, there are countries where this is just, this is what happens all the time. We were like, ooh, look at that.
So
imagine if that was just all day,
all the time.
every day. Yeah.
So think about this in Syria. Okay. So we want to depose Assad. That's our official position. We want a regime change, just like we wanted in Libya, Libya. And that's again, what a mess. That was because he wanted to take the oil and make it on their own local. He wanted to take their oil away and the money. And again, that's what, as soon as he did that shit, we got to get rid of him. And so they start funding rebels. And that's what they did. So just think about this in Syria.
So it's not about religion, it's about oil.
It's always about oil.
I thought it was always about religion.
And that's why that's what they want you to think. So in Syria, our official position is we want to depose Assad, right? But you know who was fighting Assad in Syria? ISIS. So that they're also our enemy. But we're there bombing. So who are we fucking whose side are we on? So if we bomb either of them, we're helping the other one.
Is that where Trump is getting that we're helping ISIS?
Yes. And where did ISIS get their arms from? They got them from fucking Saudi Arabia, who's funding ISIS. We know this. We invented the Al Qaeda to go fight Russia. I mean, we invented all these problems, and we always think that we're going to fix it with just a couple more bombs. A couple more bombs will fix it, or a couple thousand more bombs, or one more country to overthrow, just one more dictator, just one more if we'll just get it right this time. And by the way, we've been bombing in Afghanistan for 15 straight years. 5 more years, we get a gold watch.
No, they don't give you gold watches anymore.
This is how all empires end, by the way. And at the time this is happening, half the country is poor or in poverty. Half. 50% of all wage earners earn less than $30,000 in the richest country the face of the earth has ever seen. And so what is the point of having a nation state if it can't take care of its own fucking people? And if you don't think a revolution's coming, you're wrong.
Hold on. I want you to know that my cousin works for Boeing, and he just got his 20-year Boeing
gold watch.
No, doesn't get a gold watch. They give you gift cards to Outback Steakhouse.
Aha!
No more gold watches. Yeah. You get $50 gift cards to Outback Steakhouse. Thank you for your time.
There you go. So these are the things that people don't. And Barack Obama never had a jobs program, but that's the thing FDR did. You know, FDR, he did a lot of great things, but it wasn't because he was some super great guy. There's been letters that
he's a shitbag.
It revealed that
Not
he
total,
told
but
his
partial.
rich oligarch friends, hey, either you give some of your money away to the people now, or you're going to lose all of your money later. Because he saw revolutions. He just came out of the war. He saw what could happen. And he said, so let's give them some money. So he had the jobs program. And they went and they built parks and painted murals and did all kinds of great bridges and all this shit. And there's no program. Mm-hmm. There's no program. There's no welfare, and you have to go get a shitty job. And if you don't go get a shitty job, we have prison space. We have endless prison space. I heard a stat. I have to look this up. I heard a stat, and someone looked this up, that there are more black men in prison right now than were slaves during the Civil War. So people have no idea. Also, what kind of crazy talk about a fascist states don't have prison populations like we have. And the Bill Clinton prison bill exploded the black prison population. You know, all that bullshit about if you get caught with crack, you go to jail for the rest of your life. You get caught with cocaine, you're out in 6 months and you're okay. That's a freaking racist policy.
More black men are in prison today than enslaved in 1850.
There you go.
Or on probation or parole than were enslaved in 1850 before the Civil War began. That's according to Michelle Alexander.
The number or the percentage?
I'm going to say the number.
It must be the number.
Well,
I shouldn't say it must be, but I think she's referring to the number. Most of the increase is due to the war on drugs, a war waged almost exclusively in poor communities of color, she said. Yeah,
exclusively. So we have 5% of the world's population. We imprison 25% of the world's incarcerated population.
And do you know that you can't vote once you get out?
And then they don't let those people vote. Why? Why can't they participate in democracy anymore?
I have no idea why.
By the way, I guess maybe in a time when I didn't really care as much, I thought, yeah, of course they can't vote. You give up something when you transgress like that. But now I feel, just as sort of has been suggested here, you should be able to vote. You've paid your debt to society. You always hear that. Well, he's paid his debt to society. Well, if he's paid his debt to society or she's paid her debt to society, why can they not re-enter society as a full member?
Because that would mean that we'd actually have to figure out another way to disenfranchise black people.
I would tend to lean that way because honestly, it's like it doesn't make any sense. My boyfriend can't vote. I didn't know this until last year or whatever. But it makes sense. I don't know.
That they should be able to vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
of course, if you were trying to engineer some kind of system to keep black people out of your electoral. So I was like, well, we'll imprison a lot of them. We'll explode the prison population instead of putting that money into jobs programs or into work or whatever. Or we're just going to put it into prisons and privatize them, by the way.
But he also went in a Republican and came out a Democrat. And, and a lot of what, why
That's funny.
Yeah, because.
That's fantastic.
But it's because of all the political goings on in the prison system, and he's like, the Republicans just wanted to keep us in here, and Democrats at least wanted to give us an education or at least help us get jobs. He started a jobs program inside his prison, like teaching them how to drive trucks so they could get a job when they got out.
So now they use prison population. No, we have slave labor in America. You can't find a
for
corporation
sure.
that doesn't use prison labor.
And it's
And when
cheap.
those guys can't
It's free.
organize and they can't go on fucking strike.
Yeah.
And they got to just do it, and they do it for slave wages, literally. And so, Chris Hedges, he was a Pulitzer Prize-winning war correspondent.
New York Times.
New York Times, and when he spoke out
Went to
against
school.
the
My
Iraq-
classmate, by the way. That's my big brag. We were
Wait.
pals in philosophy class. Sat right next to him in college.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah. No, I think he's just great. And I must tell you, I wish I could say, I could tell then he was a star, but I really couldn't tell then. He was just another guy to me. I mean, I enjoyed talking to him. I loved talking to Chris, but I had no idea he was going to become.
So
Now he's like, I find him one of the most impressive minds and speakers and writers that I've ever encountered.
He tells a great story. I don't want to butcher it too badly, but he was young and just out of college, whatever, and he somehow got himself sent down to cover like something in Ecuador or something, and prison, like some kind of slave camp where they were making stuff for this company in America, and he went down there. I don't know. These guerrillas chased him, and for 2 hours they drove like crazy. People shot at him. So finally they knew they were safe, and they stopped at this cafe, and they had gotten some sodas or whatever, and they're standing out by the car. And the girl that was with him said, "Did I ever show you my tattoo?" And he said, "No." And she zipped down her pants and showed him her tattoo. And he said, "It was at that moment I knew I wanted to be a foreign correspondent."
Wait, like GUE or GOR gorillas?
The ones with guns.
Okay.
There's one thing I really like about that story.
Which part?
Since graduating college, and I've watched tons of lectures and read tons of Chris Hedges' stuff, and he's so great. I've never seen him be funny or say something funny.
Boy,
Oh, really?
he almost, it's like he prides himself on being humorless a little bit, right?
It-
Which
it's
I can
so-
I respect
it's-
a little bit.
And by the way, it's so effective, his manner of speaking and his subject matter. It's compelling in the extreme. So I don't mean to suggest that anything is lost because he's made this decision, but it's just that you would tell that story that is funny makes me laugh because there's nothing else I've ever seen him say that's funny.
In fact, when people ask him about Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, and he would, he does that horrible thing of saying that, there's nothing funny about war. There's nothing. It's like, oh, of course, Hogan's Heroes. Of course, they fucking. Have you seen MASH? Of course, Of course, you have to laugh at the thing that scares you the most. Otherwise, it will crush you. That's our way of fighting back and keeping our sanity. If you can laugh at the thing that scares you the most. And, humor is laughing at, from a comfortable position, laughing at a horrific emotional episode. Also, you need humor. Sometimes humor is the only thing that can take the piss out of someone, When making fun of Hitler kind of takes the scare out of it. I understand what he means. So I don't mean to demean his point whatsoever, but but when he said that too, he also made a great point. He said, "Keep in mind, Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert are millionaires, and they work for one of the 6 giant corporations." And he didn't say this, but I would finish it. And as soon as they said something that would cost those guys a nickel, they'll fire them. And so, I couldn't be more of a fan of Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert. Just, hats off. I had to stop watching because it depressed me how good they were, okay? It really would. It's like, oh, that's the life I would like to live.
I remember somebody said to you, maybe it was Heather, somebody who meant well, just said, "Hey, have you seen Jon Stewart and The Daily Show do such and such?" And you were like, "Yeah, that's just what I want to do is tune in and watch some guy talk about the
my
news and be
girlfriend."
funny and fuck my girlfriend.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
That's what I do, get it?
So
So yeah,
But those guys, so for everything they did, if they would have cost them money, they would have been squashed.
But I'm glad we kind of got into this because when you look at a show like Veep,
and I just did it. By the way, I just did a thing about John Oliver on my show. So he did a thing. He did that thing about third parties, and he smushed Jill Stein in with all those people. And so there's, exactly what they did to Bernie, and the emails revealed as too. There was a strategy cooked up inside of a Democratic think tank made up of millionaire neoliberal corporatists to fucking smear the guy who wasn't bought by the people they're bought by. And the smear was that he's a sexist. So again, be very careful when people who consider themselves on the left, like if you're voting for Hillary Clinton, you're on the left. In any other universe, you are on the right. The only reason is because the Democrats are so far to the right now. Right now, there's no way to vote against Goldman Sachs if you're voting for the two major parties. There's no way to vote against more war. There's way more war coming. There's no way to vote against fracking. There's no way to vote against Exxon. There's no way to vote against more militarized police. There's no way to vote against any of this shit.
Hey, can I ask you that if Bernie Sanders had won and then he did win the presidential race, would we have a shot? Would any of that happen?
We would, of no doubt.
I mean,
but
he would
that's
try.
why they made sure that he didn't
But would
win.
any of it happen?
That's why they made sure. That's why the whole superdelegates exist, to make sure a guy like Bernie Sanders doesn't happen. And that's why the corporate press repeated that bullshit number of the superdelegates, because everyone knew that the same thing was happening last time with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, and the superdelegates would flip if he won. But they don't ever give the people that information. They give that's propaganda. So you watch the news do propaganda, and that's what they were doing. And so you notice that they smeared Bernie, and it's like, oh, sure, the guy who's the most liberal guy in the frickin' world and not beholden to their people, he's not actually corrupted. Oh, he's a sexist, so they couldn't debate him on his policies. What they had to do was smear him. So they smeared him that he was a sexist, and he was nice, some kind of a naive hippie. It was a punch. You can't have universal health care in America. And so when people say that, what they're really saying is everybody knows your government is so corrupt, you can't have what the rest of the industrialized world has. You guys are even though you're the richest country with all these universities and smart people, you'll never have a more efficient healthcare plan. People say, how are you going to afford universal healthcare? We pay twice as much for our health care right now, and people are so brainwashed by the corporation to say, oh, my God, how can we afford universal health care? And I say, yeah, how are we going to afford cheaper drugs? Who's going to pay for cheaper health care? So that's how. So you notice that they smeared Bernie Sanders. You could see him thinking it up, and then people would repeat it, right? Horrible journalists would even repeat it, right? Like Matthew Yglesias and Joan Walsh, and so now they're doing the same thing to Jill Stein. So she is in danger of ticking off a couple of percentage points off of Hillary Clinton, they fear. So they smeared her immediately. Oh, she's anti-vax. She's not anti-vax. She's a doctor. She's pro-vaccine. You know what she's against? She's against a lobbyist controlling our regulatory boards, just like Bernie Sanders. By the way, Barack Obama's last nominee to be the head of the FDA, Bernie Sanders voted against, and the reason he gave was because of the guy's ties to the pharmaceutical industry for the head of the FDA, and that's what Jill Stein was saying.
Well, look at the cabinet appointments are invariably of that sort. FDA connection to big pharma.
Yes.
FCC connection to cable and
you got a guy from Monsanto who's the head of
the ag department
right
now.
What the F?
Are we ever going to get somebody like Bernie Sanders again getting close to maybe possibly running for the president of the United States?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you see why no other Democrat wanted to do it.
You don't have a crystal ball, Jimmy?
You see why as soon as Bernie did it, he knew. And that, by the way, the reason why he didn't run as an independent, which if he did, he would have won, by the way. There's no doubt he would have won. 40% of America, nobody even wants to get off their couch to go fucking vote this year. Yeah. There would have been people super excited to vote for him if he would have ran with Jill Stein, but he didn't. And the reason he told Chris Hedges that I don't want to end up like Ralph Nader. And it's just a shame what the Democrats did to Ralph Nader. What they did to Ralph Nader
Explain that, yeah.
So if what people don't know what happened was, they go, Ralph Nader got somewhere around 90,000 votes.
Ralph Nader was the independent, the third-party candidate.
So he saw what Bill Clinton did, all the things I just laid out on this show and he saw that the Democratic Party had decided through the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council, was you're going to be the new kind of Democrat. Reagan scared the shit out of him so much that he had the third way. That's the third way. We're going to become like the Republicans. We're going to get in bed with Wall Street. We're going to take all their money. We're going to sell out our workers because where else they got to fucking go? And Ralph Nader saw this, and he said, well, you know what? It's maybe somebody should represent. When he ran, his father said to him, do you really think America needs a third party? And he said, no, but it needs a second one. And so he was selling out, just like Bernie, stadiums. People were coming out. You didn't hear about that. That wasn't reported. So he goes in Florida. He gets 90,000 votes in Florida. Do you know how many Democrats said they voted for George Bush instead of Al Gore? 300,000 Democrats decided to vote for fucking George Bush in Florida. Nobody ever says that. That's how shitty of a fucking candidate Al Gore was. Even Democrats wouldn't vote for him in his home state or in Florida. So that's what really lost him. But there's even one more thing. They kicked off 90,000 black people off the rolls, and everyone knows they did it illegally. They hired an outside firm, and they took black people, and if you had a name that matched a felon anywhere in the country, they knocked you off. And it happened to 90,000 black people. And if you look, I did a video on this on my website. Every black congressperson from Florida who was affected went, and you have to certify the election. And Al Gore, there's a joint session of Congress. They have to certify the election. And so to contest the election, you have to have a signature from one senator to protest the election. I'm going to contest the election. Not one senator would do it, including Al Gore himself, who oversaw it. And, you know, I have the video, and it's heartbreaking to see one after another African-American congressman say, I don't care if there isn't a senator willing to stand up for the disenfranchised voters. And Al Gore gavelled them silent, made fun of them, mocked them. He wouldn't stand up for democracy. He wouldn't even stand up for himself. And so and they made sure after that no more frickin' Bernie Sanders. So like no more Ralph Nader. So they smeared him. Oh, by the way, that was an appointment by judicial fiat, because if they would have kept recounting, Al Gore actually got more fucking votes.
As it turns out. Yeah,
as it turns out, if they would have, but the Supreme Court, who was appointed by the guy's frickin' father, overturned the state Supreme Court, which upends precedent. They never did it before, never going to do it again. And you know what Scalia's answer to people was when they would bring that up? You never did it before. He would say, get over it.
Oh, jeez.
So that's what he was appointed by judicial fiat. And by the way, nationally, Al Gore got 500,000 more votes than George Bush. But we got George Bush because of an electoral system set up by a bunch of syphilitic slave owners who wrote our Constitution to keep power in the hands of white fucking landowners. That's what the Electoral College is. You don't get to actually vote for president in this country, which is why they only campaign in 6 states fucking anyway. And instead of everyone screaming about how screwed up our electoral system is, and why don't we have the popular vote in a democracy, what they decided was less voices. Now we only can have 2 corporate voices. Less voices. And now when Jill Stein runs, we smear her. We say she's anti-vax. And she doesn't understand quantitative easing, so she must be nuts. John Oliver doesn't understand quantitative easing. I proved it on my show. I proved it twice on my show. And if you don't understand it, maybe why would he do a corporate smear? Most of the stuff John Oliver does is usually good work, but he couldn't help himself. He started out with the conclusion that she's kooky, and everything he did was to smear her. You don't have to understand quantitative easing to relieve $1 trillion in student debt. Just like Hillary Clinton doesn't know how to build a nuclear weapon, but she did know how to invade Iraq. She knows how to shoot a gun, does she? She doesn't know how to shoot a gun, but she could spend $4 trillion invading Iraq, overthrowing Libya. Does she know how to overthrow Libya? Or is there a school you go to? And let me tell you one more thing about quantitative easing. Alan Greenspan admitted he didn't understand how credit defaults drop. So when John Oliver goes, no, it's not a magic trick, Jill. You have to understand it. They don't have to, but you better understand how quantitative easing works. No, she doesn't, John Oliver. When John F. Kennedy said we need to go to the moon at the end of this decade, nobody says that guy doesn't even know how to fly a plane. No, a leader has a vision, and then you hire people. That's why there's economists. He has a secretary of the Treasury. By the way, now they all come from Goldman Sachs, which is another thing that WikiLeaks revealed, is that there was a guy inside Goldman Sachs who sent an email to John Podesta outlining all the picks that they should staff the government with, and every one of those picks came true. From an office inside Goldman Sachs, the staffing of the federal government. Isn't that fantastic? Important that Jill Stein gets 5%. Because we need more voices. And if she was on that stage debating, it would have been a totally different debate instead of talking about people's pussies. Yeah. It would have exposed them and the whole process for the bullshit it is. But guess what? You know, it used to be the legal...
Jimmy, are we ever going to get rid of the Electoral College?
No, not unless people rise up. No one's even talking about it. They like it. You know why? Because the people in power like it.
I don't get it. I mean, I get it. I don't get why it's still...
There's been a corporate coup d'etat that has happened in this country. That's why, in slow motion. And
on this episode, actually, before this conversation, we do our Fast 15. We talk about politics and usually nothing with Michael Shure. And he explained in this episode, and I'm glad we're talking about this, and I'm delighted that you're not a fan of the Electoral College because it gives us another side.
Is anyone? He is?
He says yes, because otherwise those places in America that are filled with farming interests and all these other interests that aren't represented by population centers, they won't have a voice. It'll become, and...
He's wrong. Right now they're overrepresented.
Well, I argue that
the Senate is overrepresented.
Wait,
so there are more people who live in my neighborhood than live in frickin' Nebraska or Wyoming, and they get 2 senators.
Right.
They've got less people than my congressional district.
That's a different issue, and we touched on that.
They're totally the rural areas of this country are overrepresented, and I'm proud.
I agree.
To again contradict Michael Shure on your show.
I know you guys aren't necessarily in lockstep on anything, but I just wanted to explain that it's something that's in play, this question about the Electoral College, and it comes from that, which is sort of like, well, we don't want those poor farmers to be left out. Now, I argued there are no more poor farmers. Farmers have been bought up. It's a bunch of corporate conglomerates that are the farming industry. There are a couple of guys, I get it, who run some dairy farm out in wherever. But generally speaking, they don't exist anymore.
Ben Nelson was speaking on behalf of the small farmers when he blocked a public option in Obamacare? Do you think that's what was happening with Ben Nelson?
Explain to me why they're being left out.
Because if you just go one person, one vote, you get rid of the Electoral College, then you'll see two things.
He's saying you're just going to go campaign where people are.
Exactly.
So you won't go campaign where people aren't, which is how it should fucking work. But right now, where people are doesn't matter. My voting doesn't matter in California because everyone knows it's going to go blue. So I don't even get campaigned to. My issues don't even get raised. But if was campaigning for everybody's vote, they would have to. So the Electoral College is a leftover from when white guys wanted other white guys who were landowners to control everything. And turns out they still do.
The constituencies of the middle of the country would be left out. You'd see a lot fewer people at county fairs eating some deep fried whatever because they're not going to go spend as much time in places like Iowa and Kansas. They're going to go to New York. They're going to go to Miami, Los Angeles. This is
without the Electoral College?
Without the Electoral College. Anyway.
So what would happen is the majority of people get to actually pick who their president is. That's the way it's supposed to work. Right now, we had a majority of people, and we didn't get to pick who our president was. It was a couple of guys appointed by the guy's father on the Supreme Court got to pick, and no one's upset about it. And it doesn't, and people who can defend that is mind-boggling to me.
It doesn't make any sense to me. I'll have to listen to the beginning of this show to hear what Michael Shure is saying.
I totally understand the argument. 100% disagree with that. I disagree with the whole setup of the government. To have the Senate.
Well, I agree with
the
that.
Senate used to be appointed by the way. That was just there again. They didn't want too much. They weren't crazy about democracy, the founding fathers. They weren't so crazy about it, right? And the Second Amendment was put in there as for the slave owner states so they can make militias to go round up slaves who cross state lines and they go kill them. So that's what this is all about. It's just... again, they don't teach you history. When you watch MSNBC or CNN and they talk about Syria, they don't tell you that we've been trying to overthrow that government since the 50s.
I didn't know the Second Amendment was really put into effect so that slave owners could go round up their slaves. Really? Is that what it was?
Yeah, so you can make militias and everybody, yeah.
I thought those militias were to defend the republic.
Oh, yeah.
No?
No.
Okay. Jimmy, I want to take a moment to acknowledge your success as a YouTube star, and I mean it. And I mean that Jimmy is an internet sensation. He is supported by his listeners and viewers, as we hope someday that we're supported. Bye. And by the way, I'd be happy to be supported by Jimmy's listeners and viewers. I don't necessarily need ours to support me. But I want to tell people now how they can drink in Jimmy Dore. We'll have a hot link, but
JimmyDoreComedy.com. You know, I have, like I said, I have a YouTube show. A lot of people like to watch videos. I'm one of those kind of people. A lot of people listen to podcasts. I'm also one of those people. I have the Jimmy Dore Show podcast, which is it's an hour a week. And then we have a premium that people, so it's like $5. So people who want to support the show can do it at a very discounted rate. I don't want to gouge anybody. I'm not a math surgeon, but I think that's like a nickel a day or something. And so yeah, that's how it works out. It's really good. And the YouTube is much more fun than people know, and you can reach a lot. Like the growth is unlimited on YouTube. Like we've added over 100,000 in the last 10 months subscribers.
Well, one of the things,
we're up to 136.
You can see what Jimmy's magic is. I mean, you just point Jimmy in the right direction and he goes. I mean, I may have asked 3 questions during this last hour, and who needs to? I mean, you're great, and that greatness. And look, I am a fan, and you may not agree with everything Jimmy Dore says, but you got to love the way he says it and the way he draws the arguments out, and oftentimes he'll pull you over to his side. And your passion, and you're funny. And by the way, next time come back here and be funnier. You were more angry than funny today.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, the election's how many days away? 8 days away.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
I know. I feel it also.
I think we're all angry to be, not all of us, but
we
in
don't
general.
have the power to be funny. Jimmy does.
Well, I've had a lot of people come at me this election. I've really.
You feel people.
Have you feared your life?
You feel it's sort of a lonely plight.
Yes, You know what? I went to that book talk with Thomas Frank and Robert Shure, the great journalist, founder of TruthDig.com, and he goes, I can't wait for this election to be over. I don't have any friends anymore. And I was like, oh shit, you too, you too, because I had him on my show this week, and I asked him that. We were talking about a lot of things, and I said, what do you think about the theory? My big theory, which turns out I should have never said out loud in public, was that I think, just like how I think Bill Clinton was the greater of two evils, right? Because he can get things done that a Republican couldn't get done because he splits the natural opposition to his right-wing policies, that if Trump he's such an ineffectual. Right now, he's fracturing the Republican Party. You see that. There are people saying that the stain on the Republican Party with women voters might be a generation long right now. That's how he's damaging the party. Everyone's running from him and everything. And do you think Paul Ryan's going to sign the bill that builds a fucking wall? No, he's not going to do that. Do you think he's going to exclude all Muslims from the country? No. So this madman, any crazy thing he tries to do, it will be easy to oppose. Whereas when Hillary Clinton's doing more wars, it's going to be hard. When she's going to do more austerity, when she's going to privatize Social Security. So my theory was that, and I said that to him. I go, I think it's better to have Trump. He's such a nincompoop. He fractures the party. The party, I bet, breaks into 3 parts. It becomes a regional party. When Abraham Lincoln won, because people say this about the Green Party. They go, hey, why doesn't Jill Stein do the hard work of running for dog catcher and then getting some people on the school boards and all that shit? And first of all, they do a lot of that. Second of all, they don't have the federal funding. It takes a lot. Third of all, there's a lot of laws in place to stop that from happening, right? Fourth of all, do you know when the Republican Party was founded? I do, because I played in the city where it was founded, Ripon, Wisconsin. I did it at college there. Ripon, Wisconsin in 1854 founded the Republican Party. 6 years later, he was the president. So all that bullshit when people try to discount Jill Stein by, they don't have people on school boards and mayors and city councils all across the country, which they have over 100 people. But even if they didn't, that's just a bullshit thing they made up. Nobody said that about Bernie Sanders. Hey, why should he get to be able to run for Senate as an independent? Because he didn't start an independent party with people at dog catcher and No, nobody said that. This is a thing made up to try to, they can't argue Jill Stein's policies because they're fantastic. A fucking Green New Deal, $25 billion. It's great. So they have to smear her. And that's this whole, she's incompetent. She could never, somehow a Harvard-trained doctor who's an environmentalist is somehow some kind of a mental defective, right? But somebody who backed the Iraq war is some kind of a genius and then deregulated Wall Street and crashed the economy. More of that. Let's get rid of these people who don't know what's going on. I hope we do more war. How are you going to pay for that? No one ever said. Anyway, I'm
right.
sorry. I'm babbling.
No, I
again.
love it. I love it. By the way, do you think Elizabeth Warren missed an opportunity, and would she have been someone who you could have supported?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, but you see she didn't want to go through what Bernie went through, and then Bernie didn't want to go through what Ralph Nader went through, and that's how you get this. That's how you get a guy whose whole point of being, his whole campaign was against what Hillary Clinton is, and then he flips the script and says, nope, I was wrong. Everybody support this for 4 more years. It's the craziest thing, and there's going to be such unintended consequences from this. People don't care, right? Look what's happening in North Dakota. People don't give a shit.
Right. By the way, I think that is the biggest problem, and we'll finish there, but I think the problem is that people have stopped caring. As long as they get ESPN, as long as Monday Night Football still comes on time, they're happy. I think there really is a complacency in this country, and that's the reason, to tie it all together, nobody really is worried about global warming. Yeah, that's that thing. It doesn't really affect us. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not, even though it's demonstrably the case that it's going on. That's why people toss cigarette butts out their window. It's not going to stick to me. Same thing is kicked in on Election Day. I think there's just a sense that, what can you do? They're all flawed. They're all bad. So,
and that's, it's designed that way. It's designed to suppress the vote, the system. They want people to feel powerless. We now live in what Sheldon Wolin calls an inverted totalitarianism, where, it doesn't find its expression, with the fascism doesn't find its expression in a charismatic leader, but in the anonymity of the corporate state. And it's to make people feel powerless and disconnected. Even Chomsky talked about manufacturing consent. They want you to think that no one else is thinking what you're thinking. They want you to, all the thing that gets reinforced is the corporate point of view. No matter what, MSNBC is not what people think it is. It is a corporate point of view. What do you get when you mix $6 million a year with a liberal? You get a corporatist.
Yeah, you get a host on MSNBC.
MSNBC.
Yeah.
That's exactly. There's a great article out right now because the diminution of Chris Hayes, and it plots along how he just kept going. Oh, it is so amazing. It's in Counterpunch. I tweeted it out today.
All right, Jimmy Dore, JimmyDoreComedy.com. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Love it.
All right, thanks. Sorry for talking too much without
No,
being
I
funny.
loved it. I loved it. Jimmy Dore, everybody. Come on. Come on, Jimmy Dore. Yeah, premium content. Come on, Jimmy Dore.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. It's just something. There we go. Yeah. I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. And if you haven't already, why don't you show your support and subscribe? What's the matter with you? Go to Edge Show. Oh, shit, it's Edge Dash. What's with the dash? Stupid. All right, I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. Show your support and leave something on their website, edge-show.com. Stupid. Why is there a dash?
edge-show.com.